Hello, 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 and welcome in to Bear With Us on the Bear Claw Media Podcast. I'm Chris Bolin, joined as always by Ben Schleiger. Buddy,
No,
how you doing?
doing good.
I just wanted to see how long I could pause before you hopped in there.
I was like, you know what receivers feels like? Feels like you're at a restaurant that you've always wanted to try, but you're not quite sure about it, and there's a lot of pitchers on the menu. So it's either going to be really good or it's going to be a lot of unknowns. And I feel like I don't know what it is yet.
We spent a good probably chunk of our first episode, I guess our kickoff episode, in these little position breakdowns talking about Carver Cheeks and how he kind of ties back, really his return, but also how he kind of ties back into this receiver room. And I don't think it's up for much debate. It feels like Munroe is 1, Carver's 2, or 1A, 1B if you want to. But I think Munroe's generally earned his spot as like the top guy in that room. Then after that, it gets pretty I don't want to say iffy pretty fast, but like not talent wise necessarily, but depth chart wise, how the rest of these guys will shake out, I think can be very much up in the air.
I feel like there's a set three that we're going to see a lot of time from. I'll run down everybody in just a second. But I feel like if we're carrying over from last year correctly, River Stout, Braden Munroe, and Carver Cheeks should get some extended time. I feel like Jay Berry and Jay Berry might get a little bit of play as well. I know there was a lot of hype of him coming in from Boulder. I believe he was on the roster last year. Double check that.
He was. I know for a fact he got one catch at least in the Incarnate Word game. So he was like a game one contributor, but then it felt like he never really.
It just never worked out. But of course, the quarterback was a shit. So is what it is.
He was also hurt this spring, so I don't know how
Okay.
much he would have factored into things, but just didn't play.
Fair enough. But those three, I feel like we'll get extended time from for sure. But yeah, we'll just kind of run down the list here. We got Reese Pratt's 5'9", 178 locally from here at Northridge Greeley. So shout out locally having somebody on the roster. I know when we had oh dang it, of course I'm blanking on his name. When we had the Greeley West kid.
Delacroix.
Yeah, Delacroix. He was pretty cool. So cool to have a local kid on the roster. We're doing something right if somebody from Greeley wants to come here. We have Dylan Evans, 6'1", 190 from Air Force. Shout out, stealing somebody from locally. Jace Villers, 6'1", 194. He's from a Washington high school. Carver Cheeks, we know about you, bro. 6'2", 210. He's a Colorado Springs kid, so happy to have him back, like we were saying. Jay Berry, also a Colorado kid. He's 6'2", 190, originally out of Fairview High School. And then Kobe Kosick?
Cossacks, how I've always said it, but your guess is as good as mine.
There you go. Fair enough. 180 out of Santa Ana College. Keenan Campbell, 6'2", 220. Fort Carson. Love that we're just absolutely making that a hot spot. River Stout, 6'4", 210. Originally from Thornton, but went to Moore Park JC for a while. Braden Munroe, 6'2", 200, out of Chaparral. Dawson Manigotti, possibly. Took an extended route to get here. Pueblo West, originally, then Texas State, then Colorado State. Somehow still a freshman, so we'll see what he turns out eligibility-wise, but cool to have a local kid come back to us and drop down from another local FBS school. So basically, we've gotten everybody. Actually, Jay Berry got an offer originally from Colorado. I know that kind of went differently once Coach Prime got here, but technically, we've gotten somebody from every local FBS, including Wyoming. Trey Olson, 6'2", 208, originally from Loveland, spent time at Wyoming. Evan Morris, shout out. Thank you for leaving the dark side. 185, originally from Sherwood, Oregon, and then mistakenly chose Northern Arizona. It's okay. We make bad mistakes. We go to rivals. But hey, now you're here. So give us all the dish on what the Lumberjacks are doing. And then Bo Tate, 6'2", 191 from Bowling Green. So we definitely got pretty interesting in the receiver room. A lot of kids that saw FBS schools, maybe not necessarily FBS time, but certainly it seems like the receivers are a good crop of guys, but I don't know that we know much about them so far, even watching spring practice.
Yeah, I actually wholeheartedly agree with that. We know, yeah, I think you're ultimately right on River Stout. He probably will be that third guy, but he felt like he ran a lot of routes last year and never really got the ball. And it's so hard to separate wide receiver play from the quarterback situation last year. So I don't quite know how much blame to assign to either party. But I do think Jay Barry, if healthy, will play at least some role. I think he'll be in the mix of guys that'll be getting snaps. Kobe Kosick, I also think he's going to be a guy that will play a little bit more than we expected, but maybe he just like was one of those guys who caught like a couple passes but only ran like 8 routes, or he wasn't on the field very much last year but had his name called like at a disproportionate pace. But I think you kind of nailed it, not nailed it, but talking about there being a running back who's going to heavily contribute like win to this wide receiver group seems fitting. But they're also, I could see Menegatti like making kind of a leap and stepping up, or really any of these guys, because like you said, they're relatively unknown. Even the ones who played pretty significantly last year, just it's so tough to tell what they can actually do.
Yeah, like it's exciting to see some of those unknowns come in, like 6'2", 185, like got an offer good enough to go to Texas State, and then somehow, whatever that happened there, went to Colorado State. So good enough for two FBS schools, um, and then ends up with us. I mean, that's pretty neat, that we could have kind of like a diamond in the rough or just an overlooked player. Love that for us. Wyoming had a rough year, so I'm kind of interested that Trey Olson decided, yeah, not for me, because I know they're trying to reload and whatnot. There was a lot of transfers out, so could have been an easy way to shoot up the depth chart, but maybe he just didn't want to play that game and wanted to just be a little bit more local. I mean, really, Loveland's a little bit better of a commute than Greeley to or Loveland to Laramie, so a little bit better there. Maybe I just want to come back to the right state per se. I think there's a lot of interestingness on the roster, but like with the practice squad or the practice jerseys being just whatever number possible, like we could pick out who Munroe was. We could pick out one or two after that, but it was like it was mind numbing. So, Coach, love that you're saving money on the jerseys and we're doing really good with the equipment. Can we invest on having like a little bit of like clarity on spring
I don't
practice?
even think it's an investment. I think it's just can we just give them the same number jersey every day? Because we were at enough that I feel like I should have been able to kind of decipher who these players were, but the like jersey numbers literally switched day to day. That made it impossible to try to actually like learn anything in that regard. But I don't think this is breaking news, but Munroe worn number 88 past 2 years. I believe switching to number 1 this year. Is that what he was wearing in spring? He was one of the few that had a consistent number.
Yeah, I believe that was the plan per se. So, um, I mean, I hope he plays like number one. So that'd be great.
It does. He looks faster wearing the 1. I will say. Maybe it's just like
That little
I don't
bit
know
less
what it is
ink on
because
the jersey,
88's a good. What was
that
that?
little bit less ink on the jersey, the little bit less material, holding them
Yeah,
down.
yeah. 88's a good receiver number too, but 1 just feels like he gained or he dropped like a couple tenths off of his 40 time when he switched that.
I don't know. That also feels like a villain move. It's like, ooh, if you go down to that single digit, you gotta you got to show out. Like it's where was it? Is it Auburn, Clemson? One of those places. It's like you're not allowed to go to a single digit unless you're gonna like be a starter and a contributor. Of course, Braden Monroe's definitely doing that, but it's like if you're gonna go to number one, let's amp it up. Let's take it up a level. Like 88U is dead. Number one, all right, there we go. It's like 8 Kobe versus 24 Kobe.
Yeah, hopefully Braden Monroe didn't have any major life events that sparked this number change like Kobe may have had around the early
Yeah,
2000s, but
fair, bad comparison. But I was like, what's the most notable
no,
number
I
change?
I also don't think that was like the direct reason, but I got to be a shithead. I do think one thing that we've talked about, but first, Keenan Campbell is another guy. If we're shouting out who may kind of step up and backfill the back half of some of these receiver snaps, it felt like they were trying to feature him a bit late in the year, and it didn't necessarily pan out. But I do remember Lamb specifically talking about like plays where he's the first read, and I think in that I don't know if it was the Portland State game or maybe the game right before that, but there were a couple where they felt like they were trying to feature him and they just weren't able to. Um, but one thing that we've maybe argued on, but I think I don't actually know where you stand on this. I thought there was a good chance Carver could have been the leading or could be the leading receiver this season, just because of what we saw the second half of last year. But I do think Castelli and Munroe have like a connection that Munroe didn't have with any of the backups that came in. Where I do think they'll be calling Munroe's number like pretty heavily this season with Castelli under center. So if you had to guess, who do you think finishes with the most receiving yards on the team? Take out tight ends in case that may factor into this equation.
Yeah, I was gonna say, friend of the program, Fisher Clements was like, "Oh, that's the sucker answer," because I want to see if Fish have a great year after last year not being a great year. So that's just a homer answer, but I could see Cheeks doing more yards than Monroe, um, kind of based off of just a non-factor of just like Monroe is kind of a known quantity. I know Cheeks got several games last year to try to figure out the offense and figure out how to be a receiver and whatnot. I feel like Monroe's kind of known, like unless he's bringing like a brand new him this year and he is like number one instead of number 88. It's kind of known. Corners and defensive coordinators are kind of be like, okay, this is kind of what Monroe's all about. This is kind of like what you expect from him running routes and stuff. Um, Carver, I feel like he's got just enough experience at receiver to be dangerous, but not necessarily have film on him quite yet. So of course, halfway through the season, that could change because you run the option for 4 or 5 games in a row, and you get fantastic success, and it's like, oh well, we've seen them do that, so now we just put a guy here as a spy. That play is screwed. But I feel like Carver has that kind of just he has a taste of it, so he can work with that and kind of be the guy who doesn't have the number one pressure on him necessarily.
I think that's a fair assessment. I do think it could really go either way because I've said it time and time again. Carver is like really good at just going up and getting those contested catch balls, which I think is important. And I think you'll probably see more of them, with Castelli. If he has one-on-one coverage, just kind of chucking it up and letting him go make a play. But I also wonder with Munroe, last year it felt like he just was either out wide left or out wide right every single play. And it did seem like they were moving him around a little bit more in the spring. I think he took a couple snaps at slot, if I'm not crazy. But I think that could help because he's quick, but he's also big. Where if you're not just putting him, outside against the same corner every time, or kind of mix up where he's starting to play, and I think that'll give him some more opportunities to get open, even if it's a short cross, and let him run for 10 or 12 yards after the catch or that type of thing. So I wonder if having a full season of Carver maybe being that outside guy, like that number one outside, allows Munroe a little more flexibility, or vice versa. Maybe if they see Munroe as that, I want to say X or Y, but I'm going to say the wrong one and sound stupid, and I don't know if my ego can handle that. But you know what I'm saying? I think having both of those guys with full off seasons of prep at wide receiver could allow for some more flexibility and more kind of variance than we saw last year.
Yeah, I could see that for sure. Um, and that could be interesting if they're kind of diversifying the slot position and just kind of keeping the outside routes what they are. So would that be more so of our starting lineup kind of looks like Carver as starting outside, River secondary outside, and then Munroe in the slot possibly?
Yeah, I don't think it has to be that way, like that cut and dry necessarily, but I think ultimately it probably starts with Carver and Munroe both outside. But I like the idea, and it. Am I crazy? Do you remember that in spring seeing him line up in the slot
I did
a
to a certain
handful of
degree. Yeah.
times? Okay, so that makes me feel a little better. I don't know. I think I think just kind of keeping the defense on their toes a little bit. I think both Munroe and Cheeks kind of could pose some issues from the slot, just being a little bit bigger and stronger receivers than you may expect to see there. But also, I think they used tight ends in that position a lot last year and in the spring, so maybe that's more of the route they take with that. But I think having the option can never really hurt.
Right. I could definitely see that happening. I'm trying to think of who else might get some call up time. Um, Again, kind of cheating and playing into kick returns because we know nothing about that since I think Gwyn was the only one who got 2 reps at returning during the spring game, which thankfully there wasn't a whole lot of returning, or a whole lot of like need to kick. But Reese Pratt's a little bit smaller receiver, 5'9", 178, but one of the faster guys on the team. At least was it 1 year ago, 2 years ago that coach was saying he's one of the fastest, one of the best performing in the hill drills. I think that one could be interesting, getting him some special teams time, even if it's just put him on punt return and see if he can break one once in a while. I don't want to see Munroe doing kicks. I think he needs to focus on receiver. I think last year he thought about it too much. This year, just be a receiver, just be out there getting us first downs. Like don't worry about being doing 1,000 things on the field to try to win. Just focus on receiver.
I don't hate that. It was weird that he was returning kicks, and I remember Lamb saying like it was a bit ironic that he had those fumbles early because he was returning or punts, not kicks, but he was returning punts because he was the sure-handed one. And then you're right, he got in his head, and it was kind of game over from there. But I don't hate that. I would like to see Pratt's return kicks because maybe I'm a little looking at it a little too harshly, but I do think that's his shot at making the travel roster. I don't think he's going to get a ton of run as a receiver unless something fairly drastic changes. So I like that idea a lot because he is dynamic and he can just kind of real shifty and fast, like you said. But it is just such a question mark, and they could have like realistically take out Cheeks, Munroe, and even Stout. They could have another 4 or 5 like capable receivers behind. They could have maybe one. I don't know. It's so tough to tell. That, but if I had to guess for like the next 3 in line, this has again no real not much behind it besides former schools vibes and like what little we could kind of make out from spring. But if I had to guess, I would say I think Jay Barry will be play into that next group mix. I do think Keenan Campbell will. I like to think Menegatti, but maybe that's just a name I've heard a handful of times, like because he has a weird path, and that's more so just an interesting story more than like an actual solid expected to be contributor. And then maybe Cossack, but it could literally be kind of any of those guys, and I wouldn't be that shocked.
Yeah, I'm trying to go through and see like if we can even remember like faces from the spring game because of course most of the receivers kept their hats on because they're not in the NFL, they're not ego and taking their helmet off like, oh gosh, I gotta redo my hair every like 3 plays. Um, I don't know. I don't have a good read on who's next. I feel like receiver was almost more static last year. It was like this is like the set receivers we're gonna have, and we're just running these ones. And then running back was just like a randomized carousel. This year it feels like it almost might switch a little bit.
That's a good
Might feel
point.
like receivers might be a carousel, and running backs is like, we got a top three, top four. We're kind of gonna run with that. As far as like who comes up next, yeah, I see what you mean about Pratt's like great kid. Um, like starting time as 5'9", like a buck 80, like it's tough in the big sky. It's not impossible, but you got to be in the right spot at the right time with the right route. Um, I'd throw Jace Villers out there because that seems like a familiar name. Jay Barry and Kobe Kosick. Those all seem like standard names. I would imagine Menegatti probably gets some time, but also if he's a freshman, he's very young and there's time to develop him, Morris and Olson. Even though they have time at other schools too. That could be kind of like a good development crop that we keep an eye on. Um, yeah, not throwing anybody else under the bus by not mentioning them. It's just I feel like it's a very undefined. And besides Cheek, Stout, and Munroe, there's time and ground to make up for anybody who might be looking for playing time.
I wonder if maybe Bo Tate is a guy that maybe early in the season he's a little bit older. Um, I
You would hope
I
so as a
think he
redshirt
can.
senior, like getting him some time
Well,
for sure.
I think he went Bowling Green down to California JUCO and then to UNC. If I've tracked the path right, which if that's the case, I feel like those JUCO guys are brought in more to make, they're brought in to make more of an immediate impact. But it's you never really know. Remember, was it Tyson Bochert? I don't really know how to say his last name because he was listed as the starting number 2 receiver all season, and I'm not sure if I actually saw him take more than, I want to say like 5 to 10 snaps, but realistically, I would be surprised if he hit over 25 to 40 snaps last year. So it's so tough to tell too because what you kind of see one week may completely change, and then you're never able to kind of claw back up that depth chart.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. I would hope, um, and again, not trying to throw shots or anything, but I would hope we use our older players a little bit more than just senior day. I can't remember who it was. There was a one guy who he'd been on the team for 4 or 5 years, and literally he got one pass thrown at him, and it wasn't a great look, and that was it. And I was like, oh, geez, like it didn't even finish his career with a catch, which of course, like perfect situation. You can't always make everybody have a great college experience. Sometimes it just whatever rolls out on the dice is just what you get for your rollout. But like that would be my hope. Like if River is legitimately a redshirt senior, let's get him some time. If Kobe is a senior with no graduate student status or whatever, because we try to figure out eligibility, but let's be honest, the compliance office
Hey,
is
good
just as
luck.
confused as we are. It's just we're working with limited or outdated info. Jay Barry, graduate student, I'm pretty sure he's on his last year, so that would be my hope for the season. Is let's get some first downs because that was horrible last year.
Good goal.
Passing was anemic at getting first downs, and let's get the guys who have been around. Let's get them some extra time.
No, That is a good way to end it. I believe Waydale Jones was the
Yes,
guy you were thinking of from last year, so want to give him a
an
shout out.
absolute dog,
He
and not really getting any like in-game payoff.
But yeah, I think that's a good spot to wrap it. So as always, as Sabrina Carpenter said, please, please, please like, subscribe, comment. Tell your mom to like, subscribe, comment. If you like what we're doing, and if you don't like what we're doing, please take it up with Ben. He's always ready for a fight. If you know Ben, or if you at least know his Twitter presence, just he's ready to fire some shots off. So have a good one.